Hello, Internet, and welcome to Ship of the Week, a show where I take your suggestions and try to build them in under an hour. I'll take viewer ideas for ships, vehicles, or other machines, and when the timer starts, I have just 1 hour to design and build something that fits whatever specifications are set out for me. If I can't finish or the ship doesn't work as intended, it gets scuttled. Ships that do work will be published to the workshop for all to enjoy. Time to hop in and find out what we'll be doing this week in Ship of the Week. So this week we're going to be building a drop ship designed to take some sort of vehicle, rover-based vehicle, and drop it somewhere, presumably in a way where both survive. The key kind of feature, this was suggested by Eagle01PH, or Eagle Oif if you pronounce it phonetically. The main feature that was suggested was a deployable ramp. So, essentially, this is going to be a ship, probably large grid because I'm lazy and don't want to do it with small grid. It's hard. It's going to have a big old middle section that can fit some sort of rover in it. It's going to have at the front of that section a hole for the rover to get out, and that hole will be covered by some sort of moving wall of something that can then lower down so that said vehicle can drive off into the sunset. Yeah. Easy enough, let's hop to it. Alright, 1 hour on the clock. Let's get going. So, we'll want some of these. Want some conveyors. We're going to want a connector because that's important for connecting things. And, you know, you don't want the vehicle bouncing around when you're in flight. We're probably going to want... Let's keep it simple to start with. We'll just have some batteries. We'll go from here. So... the first thing to do is kind of build the area in which the vehicle will live. And generally, so this is a type of ship I've done a couple times before. We'll do 3 along. In various iterations. What I generally, that's probably too big for what we're dealing with. What I like to do is have a lower area of hull, and then you can sort of angle it up and then have an upper floor. So what this is, I'll just mock it up real quick. What this will look like, this level is going to be the driving surface. And then you've got these 2 blocks down here of not driving surface. This gives some room under the hull to put in, I've already got them, to put in the conveyors and all that stuff. You've got some area for batteries. So it's a nice convenient little spot. And it means that you can have a connector up here flush with the driving deck. So if your rover has a connector on the bottom, you can just lower down, lock, and all is good. And actually, I've created this, and I think I'm going to change it immediately. Just away with you. Because I could probably get away with some half slabs on the bottom here. That'll still kind of cover up the conveyors and all that stuff. But we'll kind of give it a little bit sleeker of a design. Okay. So this is kind of completely different than what you saw a moment ago. I've kind of decided to do this shape. I don't know, it seems industrial. Sort of like a big ribbed container. Nice and flat on the bottom. So you just kind of put it down. Yeah, it's something. We'll see how it goes. I'll have to figure out how I want to, create ship around this. But this will be kind of the base structure we have. So... I may leave the floor not there yet, because I don't fully know what I want under it. Where are my hinges? So, to make the ramp, this is kind of the big functional part. The first thing I'm actually going to do is convert this into a station. It's under info, convert to station. That means this is now no longer movable. It is static. So, I can do whatever I want. I can cause all sorts of clang on it, and nothing bad will happen so long as it doesn't explode. This is what I tend to do whenever I'm building, well, you can only do it with large ships, but whenever I'm building something that could be prone to issue, I tend to build it in such a way, or I tend to set it as a station just so I don't have to worry about it bouncing around, especially if it doesn't have thrusters on it. So now what I'm gonna do, so as I said, I've experimented with these a fair bit. I've found that if you have a line of hinges, the vehicle that you want to drive can generally drive over that line of hinges without much issue. I'll have to think of how to do the upper bit, but because this ramp is going to be taller than the roof kind of line. So, series of hinges, it gives kind of a surface to drive on. It's not perfect, but if you have a vehicle with large wheels that's kind of designed to be traveling around anyway, it can generally navigate this sort of setup, and it means you don't have to try any weird and janky tricks to make a smooth surface across. So there are a couple ways to build doors, and it kind of depends. I've personally found most people will use blast door blocks, which work well. The biggest key is that they're kind of designed in a way you can use these corners, and the sort of narrow bit doesn't collide with the walls quite so bad. So it means you can have it like flush in and really nice. The issue I find with them though is using it like this, oriented this way, that's the angle, that's sort of the end of the ramp on the ground. If I just pop it here, it's like that. That's not too bad. That's a 45-degree slope, but that's navigable. When the thing is, and I'll just rotate myself for convenience, if you imagine the ramp is down, so ground is here-ish now, that's now a flat surface. So you've got to get up this, like, 2.5-foot little bump before you can get in, and that's just not convenient. So I don't really like those. What I tend to do, and this has become easier first since the DLC and now since the light armor panels, I like to do, I could actually, just to make it a little bit more stylized, I like to do ramps like that. So you've got this sort of base that connects to the hinges, but the actual ramp bit is flat, more or less. So when that goes down to the ground like so, you can see the slope is at the ground. There's not block under it that causes issue. You can do this if you don't want to use the thin plates. You can do this with half slabs and then use a half slab tip at the end. But, that kind of dictates, depending on what the ground is, you can't have a super level ramp. It's very hard to, convey when I'm just floating in space with a flat plane. But, just trust me, this way I have found works really conveniently. It's the most reliably navigable in varied terrain. Now, I could have a ramp that goes all the way out to the edge, but, as I mentioned earlier, the blast door blocks are good for that because they can sort of clip through. These, not so much. It it's gotten a lot better, and now that we have hinges that are kind of fixed in the direction I'm waggling my camera, that helps a lot, but it's not perfect. So, like, I could do this, and I guess I need to stick, maybe...
Energy low.
We'll stick a battery under there, just because that should be a fairly safe spot. So, if I go ahead and do that... Oh, nope, I wanted to... Okay. Stop you. There we go. That does work. That's there. But, and I'll just kind of create a copy just in case. This may work, this may not. Are we... Okay, so this is now a movable grid. If I start waggling this... Yeah, so it's working now. Maybe I do it like this. The risk with this, and it can be a risk especially in like multiplayer where things aren't as, precisely calculated sometimes. This can cause you clang issues where, because those blocks are rubbing against each other, if this for some reason jiggles side to side, the game's like, hold up, these two blocks are inside each other, we need to either spin wildly or explode. So, maybe this is a single player only design, but there have been a lot of sort of stability improvements. Like, a while back, they went and improved the collision boxes for all the blocks, because back before that, this was completely impossible. The door probably wouldn't have even closed. Yeah, we'll go with this. What's the danger? And that means I can extend my ramp out like so. Now.
Energy critical.
It's currently there. Just gonna... I don't know. I think I've probably used this before in this series, but Build Vision, well, it says so on top of the bubble. This mod is Build Vision. This allows you to just interact directly with blocks. It's very handy. I would recommend it for everything ever because it just makes life so much better. But for anyone curious, that's what's happening. Okay, so now that's back level. My second sort of trick with this ramp. So we've got the one hinge here, and all you actually need is one hinge to operate this. But I want the smooth sort of floor. So what I'm going to do is pop these hinge parts separately, you'll notice. So it's just the hinge part, and I'm popping it into where the slot would be for the original hinge. So, normally if you place a hinge, so like if I do this and this, and do like that, I built connected to this hinge, so it's attached to this one, not to this one. So if I do like so, you can see
No energy.
I start dying from lack of energy. So you can see this hinge is not doing anything to this, even though they both sort of look like they were attached. Doing it the way I did these hinge parts, they aren't actually attached to the hinges. I can attach them if I want, and doing this you could use the torque of multiple hinges. But what I may do is just leave them unattached, because they won't, the way they're designed, they won't collide or cause any issue, I don't think. And it kind of does what I want of a smooth-ish walking surface. It'll be a smooth driving surface without having the potential issues that can come from multiple hinges attached and doing different things. So there's only one real hinge, this middle one, which I may actually name. And then all these other hinges are just fake hinges there to give a even floor and kind of give the look that it's much more rigid than it is. Okay, back again with another completely different design, and actually, I'll show another quick ramp pro tip. So, you can see there are a bunch more hinges stuck in the middle of this ramp. And actually, if I do this, I don't need these. All the hinges I'm deleting now were actually turned off. Similar to how the side hinges up here work, they were all fake, and we're just going to rotate freely with these two hinges providing the power. But if I do it this way, I don't have to. So, I can even do something like this, just so it feels like less of a weird, unsupported gap. So, we've got the hinges up there, they're doing the normal thing they're meant to do. These hinges, I've set up the limits on so that when I set them both negative, they will hinge over and actually stick this part of the ramp flush with this part. Which means I probably don't want these actually, because those might cause awkward collisions. Shoot, so could this line. It'll just be something we deal with. Point being, this will allow me to make a longer ramp, which you want to have a more easily navigable driving surface, but still fold it where it's roughly kind of level with this stuff. So, if I go ahead, I can set this one right. So that one needs a positive velocity. Whoops. This is an easy fix. There we go. So, that is now up to where if I have blocks up here, it will hit. I can fine tune this. But if I go ahead and set the velocity there to negative, and then the velocity here to negative, it all closes in nice and good. It's fairly compact. I could have it come straight up if I want, and then I just need the clearance for it. But I think I can have it out at an angle, because it'll still do the job I need it to do. Okay. So let's set... So it's currently at 60 degrees. We'll set you there and reverse you real quick. That may cause issues because of the stuff on the bottom. Hey, look, it did. I think it's... I don't know why it's deciding to stop. Anywho. That's good enough for us. We'll set this to, like, 45. And let it come up. I wonder if the stoppage is because it's colliding with the sides. Let's do a quick clang test. So, if we... Now, because the mass of the ramp is so high in relation to the overall mass of the vehicle, it's gonna move jankily like that. That's just, there's no getting around that. I think shear inertia tensor makes it worse. So, that's just part of the nature of it. As we add more to the main body of the dropship, it should get better. But it doesn't seem to be clanging out yet. One thing I may do, and this will help us a bit with, well, first thing I should turn on symmetry. So this will help us a bit with having somewhere to actually operate this ship from. If I kind of do this, now the ramp kind of comes up perfectly flush, which is cool looking. I can fit those in there and they'll be out of the way. But I have that, the slopes all align, and it means we've got some area up front here that I can put a sort of cockpit in, which will be good. So that's a pretty compelling shape for a sort of dropship landing craft. Now I think what I may do, let's do a bit more power. Maybe let's figure out thrust next. So, I'm thinking we'll try maybe one each. 2 large atmo thrusters. Then maybe have some others going like so. Like so. No, I don't want whatever that was. So that on each side, and we can kind of
Energy critical.
make some lines to connect them. Darn energy. These should allow it to operate on planets and actually touch down. I think the next thing I'll do, we'll just build a solid wall there. So this is a design I've experimented with a bit, for ships that I want primarily to operate with electric power or thrust sources, so ion and atmo thrusters. But I want them to be able to, just on their own power, leave planets, which is hard to do with just these power sources. So what this is going to be is a sort of hybrid style ship. Probably doesn't need reverse ions. It can just spin for that. So this thing's going to have essentially a solid or not solid, but it's going to have a hydrogen booster built into it. That booster we will use one of these. If I build a gap in there. Yeah. So I can kind of close all this up with armor, all the sort of internals. But this big booster should give it enough power if it points straight up that it can leave the planet. Hopefully. Then when it comes down, it can use the big atmo thrusters to actually land. And in space, it'll use these ions to sort of maneuver around. Okay. So, yeah. I think I made a ship. I could maybe... I kind of want them under there, but I don't think it'll... I can make it work. Yeah, so changes have occurred. Not really, additions have occurred. So, at the back here, I've got some gyros, some O2H2 generators, which I should maybe get filling with ice, just so that this thing can move. Yeah, we'll get that going. So, that'll fill up the tank there. Inside here is now more cluttered. I've got a bunch of batteries down here just to provide power. I've got an oxygen tank for the crew. I've got some cargo containers, because while this thing doesn't need a ton of cargo, I think the main idea is that it transports a vehicle. You know, you'd want some stuff available for repairs and just kind of to be able to transport, you know, do stocking up of the vehicle and all that jazz. So I've got that. Then, at the back here, what is going to be floor height, I could probably go ahead and put it in, because I don't think I have anything I want to stick under there. We've got this ladder, which leads up to this, if you don't, there we go, leads up to this upper catwalk. You can walk along, you can see from above the vehicle. The roof is going to be here with these pipes running through it. Maybe I want gravity on this thing. But, yeah. So walk up here. Then you've got this sort of long tunnel that leads to the bridge. Just sort of stuck out here. But it seemed fitting because, you know, it's the... You can kind of see all around, see down. All that stuff right at the front of the ship. Seemed pretty good. And then what I may do is... The paint will be making this sort of mohawk thing look correct to be there. I'll find something to fill in that gap. But yeah. So the last thing I think I really need... Some thrust coming out the back. Like so. I'm gonna do this just to kind of... I don't know, make things look held on and correct. And then something back here. Ah, dang. That would almost line up perfectly there. Guess I can do... I can just do the easy way and do it like that, and don't worry about that not lining up, it's supposed to be that way. Yeah, this should do. Pretty simple, but that's kind of the name of the game on this thing, is simple. Very industrial. Got your thrust going every which way. Got big old fuel tank, and thruster. There is probably room on board I could stick some more stuff if I wanted, but should work fine as is. Let's do those bad boys, those, and then do this in a way I can use those stairs later. Boom. That is a ship. Now one thing you may have noticed, I've not bothered with doing anything to seal this off from space. You could fairly easily, in fact I kind of designed it in a way you could, if I move these catwalks back a block, I could I could stick in airtight hangar doors that would align on this block so that you have a sealable bay and then the ramp. Unfortunately, with how Space Engineers works, there's no way to make it so that this ramp is a door. Like, that doesn't happen. Oh, I just realized a thing I forgot as well. Oh boy. Time is getting close. We've got 10 minutes roughly on the clock. Let's do... just some quick lights around. They don't have to be much because this is a industrial grungy looking ship. Yeah, there we go. Get some dramatic, that's the wall. Some dramatic underlighting for this area. Okay. I also need gravity. We're getting tight. Okay. So, real quick, trick for gravity. You can see this is the pipe that runs back to the hydrogen tank just to keep all of this stuff connected. If I had like a tank or something here, this wouldn't work, but I don't. So what I'm gonna do is get my bits. I've turned off symmetry. I'm just going to make a little crooky thing, like so, so that here, kind of center line on the ship, I can put a gravity generator. You don't technically even need to put them center line, because they do an area out around, but I always like it because I'm not going to do it, but if I wanted to, I could set it up so that it only covers the area inside the ship. It doesn't have any sort of bleed of the gravity. Okay. Now if I'm right, if I hit reverse on this, nothing happens. Why? Is it because they are too close? Yes. So what we saw there was that things were sticking. So okay. Last minute design changes. As much as I like them coming out to the edge, that inconsistency is what I was talking about. You have to kind of wiggle it to get them to release, and that's not very convenient. Plus, given you one area to be able to walk around the vehicle and all that, a 3x3 or a 3 wide ramp is probably all you want.
Energy low.
It tends to work for most, standard width vehicle designs anyway. So what I've just done there, I just remembered I want this gap covered, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to drive across it. The way I've done it, if I go ahead and select you, reverse that, you can see they break away. So each bit kind of breaks away separately. So, nice and convenient. Unfortunately, it's important not to forget things as you're designing. There's not enough room. If I reverse this, well, we could try it. 6 minutes. I don't think this'll fully close. Yeah, see, it's bonked. And it's only at 44 degrees. which doesn't quite do what we need it to do. So, let's reverse them again. What I'm going to do is just set this a little bit lower. So 42 when it's stowed. And I guess what I need to do as well is get the lower level set so that it is kind of at ground height when we land on the bottom of the ship. Well, maybe how we do that, instead of having it be completely flat, whoops, I'll have these out with some mag plates. Just so it kind of has some landing legs. It makes sense to have. And then it should be fairly convenient if I...
Energy critical.
Yeah. I just need to raise this up and turn my... Oh, my lights were off. Raise that up a bit. So my trick that I like to use, when it's on the ground, it'll be sitting on these mag plates. So if I kind of just create a plane off of that, I can lower this until it's colliding. Because we're a station, nothing super janky happens. So it looks like the maximum I can force it to bend down is negative 21.72. So if I set the minimum velocity, and I want to do this in a terminal so I can type it. So if I set the minimum, or not minimum velocity, the lower limit to negative 21.5. Set the velocity to maybe negative 1 will help it so that the end ramp can deploy quicker. It's been ever... Oh, darn you. You can see pretty much touching, because technically the merge plates are slightly lower. That should be good and drivable. Last thing I'm gonna do real quick, just because we have created some gaps where there is no road. We'll have these sort of safety railings, just, you know, so you can look out and observe. And I should have a button. Probably one of these because they look cool. So, last thing to do, because I've set these up with the velocities in the correct way, I can just create a group called ramp hinges. And then if I set in that group to reverse, up folds the ramp. And it should, if I've measured correctly, yep, do with just the ittiest little gap there. Still looks pretty flush from the front. It's all a little chunky, but with how the game works, that's how that's gonna go. Last but not least, convert to ship. So if I hop out, I could walk through it's It's gonna irk me if I don't have something there. Do I have? I do. Okay. Yeah, so. It should. Yep, it is able to move. It's able to thrust with the big old hydrogen. Hopefully, it's able to land on a planet. So, with 18 seconds left on the clock, I really pulled that one to the end, we've got this, which looks like some sort of grub beetle thing. Yeah. It's, you know, it's probably not perfect, but it should function. I guess that remains to be seen. So, without further ado, time for some testing. Alrighty. So, here we are. We're just outside of planetary gravity. I figure the basic test for this thing, we'll take it down, make sure it can land. Real quick, I'm going to hop out. Oh, I forgot to name it. It looks kind of bug-like because it's got 6 legs. It's got the little snoot up front. I think we're going to go with rhino beetle. Even though it doesn't really look like a rhino beetle, but it's kind of got the little snoot horn thingy. I guess it's more of a horn pinchery thing on a rhino beetle. I don't know what type of thing it is either. I mean, I guess it is a vehicle dropship, so we'll just maybe call it a rover dropship. Because technically it is a vehicle. Okay. The Rhino Beetle rover dropship. I didn't actually get a blueprint of it. Lighting's not great, but I'll deal with that later. Oh, and I feel like... Okay, we're barely in gravity. Let's do the whole shebang. So we can see the planet down there. Climb up our ladder. Climb up, down the tunnel with the sort of guide light, because that's all the light there is. Now we're in the cockpit. Down we go. We'll just let gravity kind of do its thing. It is not quick in space, but that's fine. It could move a lot quicker with the hydrogen thruster. It's just not going to be, you know, maneuvering very well. So let's get it up to speed, and then we'll let it coast in. I've aimed for an area that... there's no lake here. That would be kind of the optimal place for these types of things. Something very flat. But I want this to be usable on not quite so flat. So this is an area, some plains, probably some little hills. You know, it'll probably be good. It should be a decent test of can this thing actually take on vehicles in multi-terrain, potentially unfriendly terrain. So part of my idea here with this test, you may have noticed there's no vehicle in the vehicle hangar. Mainly because in space it's a pain to deal with the rovered vehicles if they don't have like mag or gravity blocks on them, whatever they're called, mass blocks. And I don't have a vehicle with mass blocks on it already built. So I'm just gonna go down to the planet. I figure if I can go and land as is, I did chuck it full of ice so that the hydrogen tank would fill up. I also may have realized in the in-between, there's no actual way on this ship there's only one connector and it's inside. So to refuel it, you would have to have a rover with a bunch of hydrogen on it come and put the hydrogen into this, which is kind of cool, but not very useful, especially when I have a gas station full of hydrogen way over there that is not in rover form. So, yeah, hopefully it'll have enough hydrogen to leave the planet. We should at least have enough to verify it has the thrust to do so. Also, maybe should have wanted to put parachutes on it, but here we are. That's part of the nature of the show. We're gonna go down to the planet, land it, make sure it can land with its own weight, and then from there we'll see if it can load a vehicle from the ground and take off. Because if it can load a vehicle from the ground and take off again, that should be pretty, it should be able to do that in reverse and land with a vehicle in it. Can't tell if the sun is setting or if we're just getting into a place that was already dark. This could be steep mountains and I didn't know because it was already dark. I think the sun's setting. Let's, get things well lit for the testing. Seems only fair. I guess what I can do here, because we're just free falling, I can align myself so that when it's time to stop, I just hit stop and hopefully the big thrusters do their thing. So it looks like we are drooping down. You can see at the front there. That's because of the mass of the ramp. It could be causing some slight phantom forces. With how it's collapsed in. It's not enough to cause anything dramatic, but we aren't as stable as something would normally be. Oh, there is a lake here. In fact, I think I've been to this lake before, but we aren't going to use it. So it's not super stable because of the mass of the ramp, but that's fine. We're in 1G, so let's see what we can do. It's not super quick, but it does... Yeah, it is slowing itself, so we should be okay. Oh yeah, with plenty to spare. Now obviously the side... all the directional thrust is not going to have enough force to keep us in the air. It needs to be pretty level, but I figure that makes sense given it is a drop ship. They tend to drop flat. Yeah, so seems decently capable in atmosphere. Different environments may vary, but we slow down fast enough. It should, with proper care, be able to operate just fine on, say, Pertum or the alien planet that have higher than standard gravity. There's obviously a limit, but it doesn't seem too perturbed. So size-wise, this is something that can happen if you have a really big ship. It can be hard to find a flat enough spot. And actually, let's go over here. This is flat in one way, but it's very angled another. So, too large of a ship can be hard to find a place to dock it. This thing seems small enough that it can you can kind of find ground that's enough that it'll sort of fit level. Which is good for these sorts of things because you need the ramp fairly level to the ground to avoid difficulties getting in. Okay. So that's dampers off. I don't have a way to lock the mag plates, but we shouldn't need it. We're pretty stable. Now. One thing, and this is debatably important, we'll see what happens. I don't know if the ramp can deploy when we're landed. We're about to find out. Oh, just perfectly. I'd like to claim credit for that, but I really didn't plan it out. That just happened to work. Now, with the way the terrain's sloping, that's a pretty big gap there. Let's maybe hop out and see what it looks like from the ground. So, you can see we're level. We can kind of walk down the ramp. And that's a bit high. And part of this too, if the ground were perfectly flat, that would probably be touching. Or close enough that you could walk up it without having to jump. As it is, the ground, because it kind of slopes down, it's not really doing that. Something I can do, and it's not ideal just because there's not a great way to do it, conveniently, but I can always do that. Just lower the sort of height, and now I can walk right up it with no issue. Then when I want to land on a flat place again, I just have to remember to reset it. So that's kind of you do have some control, but without build vision especially, it's a pain to have to kind of adjust in the terminal to kind of get it to the right spot for different terrain. There's unfortunately not a very convenient way to do this. I guess maybe you could try something with a sensor, but I don't know. It works, it's functional, and you can kind of do what you need to. So now, need to F10, and what I'm going to do, because it makes sense for a sort of, deployment ship, I've got this tank. So this is something, I built this a while back when we first got the turret controller, custom turret control mod. And it was a couple iterations down the pipe to get this to actually function. I could probably, if someone is curious, I could probably build something similar in the future. But this should work well because it makes sense for being deployed via ship. It has some pistons to raise it up for if you have to fix things. Hopefully it doesn't tumble down the hill. Oh, it's tumbling down the hill. Will it stop? Sure. So, looking underneath, it does have a bottom-mounted connector, which is good. It's a little bit wider than a standard Rover tends to be, at least for me. Most of the time I do where it's one block and then wheel and wheel. This one's 3 blocks in between the wheels. So a little bit wider. I can't get back in the cockpit now. Yeah, should be a good test. Also, it's all heavy armor, so it's heavy. And I guess with this, it's less of a thing because the wheels are pretty even. But I probably want to back in so that it's ready to quickly deploy next time. So a little bump, but depending on the vehicle, you can design that, and they tend to bump anyway. You can see we can park brake and hold here. The width of the ramp is good. It's, it could be wider, but it's wide enough to fit this perfectly fine. Again, it just has, here's the minimum, or you have a maximum width to design your vehicle, but that width is perfectly fine. If you had kind of you might run into issues with something that has 3 blocks in between large grid wheels. It'll be close, but, again, just design things that work. So you can see this gap here. We could, whoops, I just did the thing where I hit the gas instead of the brake. This is really confusing doing it backwards. You can see we can just fiddle all along this ramp with no issue. That gap works fine. This bit, drive over it without issue. You can see I can stop on it without much problem. Now this thing's designed with suspension very low to kind of allow it to crawl over things. Let me... Let's do this out here so it's a little safer. If I set the strength to 10, which is way higher for something with this many wheels, that's way higher than you should ever have your strength set. That's a different tale. So you can see still gets on fine. Actually, this thing's heavy enough. Let's try 50. Really just poorly designed. So as I go up and over, you can see we kind of stay rigid. We fall into gaps. But because there's stuff in there, there's enough that you can sort of climb over without much issue. Now, one thing I am noticing, and I think this is less a design of this is less the ship and more this vehicle I'm in, it seems to try and skitter sideways, which isn't ideal. But if I lower ourselves down, there's the connector, and I should... This is a little tip I've learned, or trick I've learned, just to keep the wheels from rattling on the deck of these sorts of things. You drop your wheels down until the magnetics hit. Then you can actually push up beyond where the magnetics go. You can go all the way up, and the connector is still ready to lock. So, I'm now locked at full wheel height. I can... dang it. I can unlock and break the whole thing. So, now, I can raise my wheels up until they go up no more. It's hard to see because I think I did it wrong, but the wheels are no longer actually touching the ground. We're connected with the connector. Under there you can see it's green. It's holding us in position. This is just, it's not necessary, and generally it doesn't cause too many phantom forces. It can, if the wheels are bouncing on the ground, but this just keeps things from bouncing around and kind of cuts down on the clatter, because you'll hear a bunch of banging and stuff when you're flying. So that's loaded. Now let's see. This may go poorly because the hinges at the end want to go quicker than the hinge on the body. But yeah, so it's lifting us up. It's dug a little hole in the ground. Ah, dang. It did damage itself. Yeah, so, okay. That's a tick against. I'll just leave this. I have a blueprint. That is a tick against it, but that could also be operator error. Ideally, you'd want to be able to lift the ramp while the thing's on the ground. That just seems right. But I have a control in here to do it from the cockpit. So, you know, knowing how the vehicle operates, you could lift off with the ramp out, no issue, and then close the ramp as you lift up, which would give it enough clearance not to hit the ground. That is that. We've got a thing on board. Turn on the thrusters. You can see we go up just fine. We hold position in the air, which is good. Sometimes when you have subgrids as ships attached, it can cause the ship to sink because it doesn't account for the mass. I think they supposedly fixed that, but they've supposedly fixed a lot. you can hear a little bit. That sort of whirring is the wheels banging on the ground. So he didn't get him quite up high enough. That doesn't cause an issue, it's just kind of annoying. But you can see we're now going up. I didn't actually have my... It's hard to have Alt and space pressed sometimes. But going up just fine. If I turn on our hydrogen thruster, angle ourselves straight up. Now, normally you'd want to do this with thrust overrides and all that jazz, but I don't really care. We may run out of fuel, but you can see that we can go up and then thrust in 1G, which means... we're out of gas. Under normal operation, that would not be a problem because you'd fill it up more than I did. We're probably not going to make it out of gravity now because the ions alone won't do it, but had our hydrogen tank not been empty, we would have had enough fuel to blast off into space and head off to wherever we're going next. So yeah. Despite the fact we're now plummeting towards the Earth, I think this vehicle's a success. Well, it's nosing into. When you just let it do its own thing, it really doesn't like it. But that's nature. So yeah, it works. The Rhino Beetle Rover dropship? Is I think what we called it? Yes. The Rhino Beetle Rover dropship will be on the workshop soon. Probably not this one. Yeah. Despite the situation we're in now, it does work. So, thank you everybody so much for watching. Feel free to check out any other stuff I've done. And until next week, wish I'd timed this just a little better. Any minute now. There are the trees. And until next week, bye-bye. I actually fared pretty well.